Hello and welcome back to another episode of Farewell Evangelion, the podcast where we go through the Neon Genesis Evangelion series bit by bit. My name is Keith, going through for his last time, and as always I'm joined by Peter.
Hello!
Who is going through for his first. Today we went through Volume 7 of the Shinji Ikari Raising Project. This one was originally released on March 26, 2009. You didn't really think all this raising being inflicted on Shinji by his parents and guardians was without constructive purposes, did you? A purpose perhaps related to a giant robot-like thing? As Yui deals with the fallout from Jetalone affair, her son tries to mind his own affairs, but usually just ends up failing.
Yeah, it's a bad time for Shinji.
Yeah, it also kind of sounds like the synopsis there is also calling out the reader.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, what, you little bitch? You didn't think we were gonna do, Evangelion ever? Guess what? We're still not. Fuck you.
I mean, Angelic Days didn't.
Yeah, it's true. Angelic Days just really did. Which is fine. It was still a good time. Everyone had fun. Except for Shinji. Shinji didn't have fun.
He had a bit of fun.
Shinji's having a lot of fun in Volume 7.
That's true. But before we get into that, how'd your prediction go?
Alright, so, I know this has become a meme at this point, but I'm giving myself partial credit, because we didn't have Evangelions physically, but they have started moving in a bunch of mysterious parts that are related to their plans, and it's all very confidential, so pretty clear they're bringing in parts to build Evangelions. In addition, we saw the whole Project E interim process report, so they're working on Project E, and I'm pretty sure E stands for Evangelion, so, all signs point towards they are in the process of physically assembling the Evangelions, and Evangelions are coming. It's just they haven't specifically shown us Evangelions, so partial credit for that. There was no culture festival. I have to be honest with myself. There's never going to be a culture festival. I just need to accept that and move on. And then also, while there was no physical punching from Asuka towards Hiroshima. Asuka absolutely beat this. Hiroshima.
With a K.
Kira. Yeah, you're right. Not H. K. Hiroshima. Hiroshima is a little bit too close to Hiroshima, and that's a whole other situation. So I should be careful about which one I'm saying. While Asuka didn't
you just call her Mana.
While Asuka didn't physically punch Mana, she absolutely kicked the shit out of Shinji, and there was a very aggressive moment between the two of them, and also some other characters. So I'm giving myself partial credit. This time it's just a flat C. I get a C for my prediction for today.
Going back to the situation with the Mana thing, it was a really great scene where it's both Mana and Kaoru show up together, like, oh, hey, Shinji, how's it going? And both Rei and Asuka just turn back, give him a glare, and it's like, oh, yes, good day, Shinji, as in, goodbye. And they just turn around and leave.
Yeah. So, first chapter of this one, the three of them are called to come down to the lab after school, which is interesting, because they haven't actually been called down to the lab super recently. They've kind of taken a break from lab stuff. So, down to the lab they go. And while they're walking towards the lab, they kind of remark that there's been a lot of trucks driving along the road. And Shinji's like, well, maybe they're all going towards the lab, because that's the direction we're going, and that's the direction all the trucks are going. And then, Rei even pipes up like, yeah, now that you mention it, when I was leaving, a bunch of trucks were driving into the lab. So, I don't know, maybe trucks are delivering stuff to the lab. And then they get to the lab, and the lab's very busy, because all the trucks were, in fact, delivering stuff to the lab. And it's very loud and stuff. Not loud, busy. Busy's the word I'm looking for. It's very busy, and stuff. Stuff is busy. So, lots of people in the lab. And it turns out they didn't even, call them in to do any tests or anything. It was mostly because they wanted the three kids to see that the lab is busy sometimes.
Oh, and Gendo also wanted to say goodbye to Shinji before he went on his super secret trip.
Yeah, Gendo's going on a super secret trip. He wanted to say goodbye to his beloved child. We also get the very fun moment of Gendo saying, "Oh my god, Shinji, you've grown so much since I last saw you!" I have to assume that's the voice that Gendo said it in.
Probably.
To which Shinji responds, "I saw you 2 fucking days ago. What the fuck are you talking about?" that kind of entrance where he sneaks up on Shinji, gives him a hug from behind, and says some weird, mushy crap to Shinji. Which is, kind of peak Gendo in this series, if I'm being honest. And also, minimum Gendo in any other series. But it's pretty perfect. So anyways, Gendo leaves on his trip, and he's gone for mysterious reasons. Ooh.
Yep, so this puts Yui in charge of the lab, and later on, kind of with the return of Fuyutsuki, him also partially.
Yeah, we get to see Fuyutsuki again. This is jumping ahead a bit, but it's not like super relevant to the point when it's happening. But we end up seeing Fuyutsuki in a later chapter, and Fuyutsuki makes a comment about how Yui's out for the day, so he's technically in charge of the lab, and it's pretty exciting stuff for him. And then someone comments on how Gendo just dropped off a bunch of invoices and tax receipts and a whole bunch of, reports that they have to file. And since Fuyutsuki's in charge, he has to handle that right now. To which Fuyutsuki comments that that's probably the entire reason Yui left, is because she knew Gendo was about to drop a bunch of busy work for them to handle, and she didn't want to have to be the one that handled it.
So my favorite part about that whole thing with Fuyutsuki, though, has to be that I think for a moment there, Fuyutsuki was actually just gonna, spill any one secret about the facility that Asuka wanted to know. He's like, oh, it's your lucky day, I'm technically the one in charge. What knowledge do you wish, child?
What do you want to be revealed to you? And then, the two Nerve employees who come up to give him all those tax documents, he even turns to them, he's like, Papa Fuyutsuki's in charge, what information do you desire? And they're like, the information I desire is how the fuck do I make you do all this busy work? So that's what's going on there. Anyways, jumping back. Gendo leaves the lab, and so after that, Misato's like, alright, well, we're done here. We just called you down to see that the lab was busy, so I'm going to take you out to dinner. Whatever you want, the sky's the limit. Do you want steak? I'll get you guys steak. And Asuka straight up's like, first of all, no you won't. I don't believe you for a second. Second of all, kids don't even want steak anymore. You got weird, outdated views there, Misato. So they end up at a ramen shop because Misato realizes she's actually super fucking broken. There was no way she was going to be able to get them steak.
Classic Misato move.
Classic Misato move. So she buys them ramen. They all order various forms of pork ramen because they're in a pork ramen shop, except for Rei because Rei doesn't eat meat. So she asks for the pork ramen, the pork garlic ramen without the pork, and Asuka very wisely says, take the pork you were going to put in her ramen and put it in my ramen instead.
Yeah, and as we already kind of know, the through line for one of Rei's traits is she always tends to be vegetarian.
Yeah, it's a very standard plot. So anyways, the ramen is, I guess, spicy, or just the ramen restaurant is quite hot, so Asuka does that thing where she, tenses her shirt a little bit so she can breathe a little bit easier. And Shinji uses this as a perfect opportunity to see Asuka's bra straps. And so she punches him. And while punching him, he spills his ramen on his crotch. Because this is Shinji Ikari, son of Gendo Ikari. Of course that's how he behave.
It's not even a surprise anymore. I'm surprised people are still surprised by this stuff.
There's literally a point later on where Shinji has this stuff happen, and Misato calls out, well, I guess he really is Gendo's son. This isn't Shinji behavior anymore, this is very clearly Gendo behavior that Shinji has adopted, which is quite fun, if you ask me.
It makes you wonder if, in the idea of, the times keep resetting themselves, and there's different variations on the universe, with Kaoru playing some manipulative role in the background, he's just okay, the Ikaris get harem anime powers, that's how we're gonna solve this one.
Yeah, let's see if that makes Shinji happy. And based on the fact that this other stories exist, it is not enough to make Shinji happy. Which is weird, because if I had harem anime powers, I would be very sad. So, they have their pork ramen. Rei feels bad for Shinji because he poured ramen on his crotch, and so, using Shinji's harem anime powers, she decides to start helping him out. And while she's helping him out, she bends over and Shinji sees down her shirt and sees her bra as well. So Shinji's seeing all the bras today. And then Asuka starts wiping off... Not Asuka, Rei starts wiping off his crotch with a napkin. And so Shinji runs away. because they're unwanted harem anime powers.
One thing I will say that seems to start getting highlighted, and it was a bit with the last volume too, that Rei is almost starting to feel a bit inconsistent in this storyline.
Yeah,
because it's not inconsistent like how she's acting, but her knowledge of how the world works seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, she seems to be learning less and less about the world.
Yeah, because in the previous one, it was like when she first shows up in the story, it didn't seem like she was, the Rei we know and love that was trapped in a lab for her whole life. This seems like she was just new to town and didn't quite, understand people, but understood the world. And now it seems like, what? How does this get misconstrued?
Yeah. And it gets worse later.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into. So, that's kind of what this chapter is. It's them going to the lab, Gendo saying goodbye, and then shortly after he says goodbye, they all go out and get ramen together, and stuff happens.
Misunderstandings, hijinks.
Yeah, general Shinji Ikari raising projects events happen. So, the next chapter, they say they're kind of redoing an earlier test where it's the dancing synchronization test. So first of all, they admit a couple of things. They need to get the sync rate between the three of them up. So they're doing the test they've done before, which was the dancing sync rate test. But instead of it just being Shinji and Asuka or Shinji and Rei, it's all three of them have to dance in sync together.
Yeah, and they bring back the clothing from the anime. And I love the fact because when the anime was first done, it was done in, just early into the 90s. So like the 80s had just passed. So all that stuff had the 80s aesthetic to it. And those dancing clothes were very 80s. And then Asuka even calls out in this one, it's like, what's with this 80s aesthetic? And we saw just like, it's coming back, trust me.
Yeah, and Ray's even, or not Ray, Asuka's even like, what's next? Are you gonna get us to wear fucking leg warmers?
Which they wore in the thing.
Which they wore in the original anime, which is great.
Yeah.
So, anyways, they start doing their dance project, and all of them behave the way they normally do. Which is, Shinji is clumsy and can't dance well, and Asuka refuses to march to the beat of anyone's drum except for her own.
Yeah.
She's gonna dance her way, everyone else is gonna have to sync up with her. That's what's going on.
To be fair to her, like, I would normally say, oh, it's weird that they're doing the same problem over and over again, because this is the third time this exact problem has happened in the comic.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, it's always worked for her, is the other issue. Like, it always seems to, like, her doing, like, no, get on my level, is solve the problem every time.
With the exception of the three-legged race, that one time, they ended up winning because she agreed to get on Shinji's level for the second half of the three-legged race. So she has experience, she absolutely has the reinforced experience of forcing them to get on my level, has worked out in the past, but she also has experience of agreeing to be on Shinji's level has worked for me at least once.
Yeah.
In any sense, or in any case, it goes poorly, and they don't manage to sync up. So, Misato leads them not towards the elevator when they're done. Instead, she leads them to a very small, like, almost bachelor apartment. But this one has 2 beds, and she's like, alright, cool, this is where you guys live. And they're like, what? And she's like, yeah, we don't have time for you guys to be going home and coming back to the lab, so for the foreseeable future, until you manage to perfectly sync up as the 3 of you, you live here in the lab, in this one room that has 2 beds. And no one, for the moment, thinks about the mechanics of the 3 children sharing 2 beds.
No, Misato definitely thought about this. This is all just the social experiments they're putting Shinji through for the evolution lab.
Oh yeah, no, when I say no one thinks about this, I mean none of the 3 children think about this until it comes later. But Misato absolutely did this 100% on purpose. So, Shinji agrees to cook dinner, and as soon as he walks out of the room, Asuka's like, now's my chance, I have to change. And so she does. And then Shinji, immediately after leaving the room, turns around to look at Asuka and is like, yo, Asuka, what do you want to eat? And Asuka gets pissed at him because he left the room, leading her to believe it was safe for her to get changed, and then the moment she started getting changed, turned around to peep on her, because that's obviously what Shinji was doing 100% on purpose.
It's like no one knocks.
Yeah, no one knocks in the small apartment that doesn't have a door.
Which is odd, because there's also the bathroom in there.
Yep. just a weird time. So anyways, they cook dinner, they eat. Asuka makes it very clear that Shinji's going to have to learn to be careful from now on, because if this happens again, she will 100% murder him. Which I think is fair. This is Shinji's problem, he should learn how to fix it. So the story kind of progresses over a couple days with Shinji not being able to get on their level while they dance. They do like practice tests where it's just Shinji and Rei, or just Shinji and Asuka, and in both cases they actually manage to sync up pretty well. It is only when all three of them are included that the dance goes poorly. In fact, I think they even do a practice test where it's just Rei and Asuka, and like it doesn't go perfectly, but they manage to kind of do it after a couple attempts. So it's
I don't think they ever do it perfectly together with Asuka and Rei, because they keep clashing and complaining about each other. I don't think they ever do it actually perfectly in any of them. Even the one at the end that does the best, which is Shinji taking the lead and then facing themselves on Shinji.
Also, now that I think about it, I don't think they do an attempt of Rei and Asuka during this chapter. I think that's a later chapter when we see Rei and Asuka dancing together.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's great.
So anyways, yeah. Turns out Shinji can sync up with either one of them. It's just when the three of them are together that Shinji is incapable of dancing correctly. And even when I say syncing up with either one of them, he's doing it like moderately well. He's still not perfect, and also he doesn't know how to turn the harem anime powers off. So he keeps tripping and falling in such a way that they land in compromising positions.
Exactly.
Anyway, so this continues for a couple days. They keep arguing and fighting about how everyone needs to get on Asuka's level, and it comes to a head and they all start fighting, and Asuka makes it very clear, you guys just need to get on my level, this is the only way this is going to work. And Rei's like, Asuka, you don't even understand yourself, you need to start watching other people so that we can all sync up together. And then they turn to Shinji and they're like, alright Shinji, who's right? And Shinji's like, what if, hear me out here, because I'm the worst dancer, I lead and you two both follow my spasmistic dance moves. And they're both like, you know what? That's crazy. But that's so crazy, it just might work. And then they try it, and it works, up until they collapse into a heap of the three of them, and then they're getting mad because it fucked up, when obviously it was going to fuck up. But as they're getting mad at each other, Yui pipes up and she's like, you know, actually, the data from that last one, not so bad. I could publish a paper on this. And so they all move on with their day.
Except then she decides it's probably not good to tell the world what type of science we're doing here.
Yeah, I don't want to publish a paper of I made 3 junior high students dance all day, every day for 5 days straight until they could manage to dance in sync. That's not exactly the kind of science she wants to publish.
Also, during this volume, Shinji very much takes on the aspect of, I don't want to escalate this, so I'm going to deflect.
Yeah. So, that is the first one. Or not the first one, that's the second chapter. On to chapter 41, which is, they start talking about how, now that they've gotten the three of them to have a decent sync rate, they're going to move on to the next phase, but for this phase, it's not going to be all three of them syncing up, it's going to be the two that have the highest sync rate working together, and then the third kept as standby. Misato's very clear, because of how things have been going, this is going to be Shinji, and either Rei or Asuka, we need to figure out which one of them can sync up the best with Shinji, and then the other one will be put on standby.
Yeah, and this is kind of the central plot of this volume moving forward for the rest of it. It all comes back to the fact that they need to get a pair of 2 with a reserve.
Yeah, so they don't know exactly how it's going to work, but that is what's going on. So, Shinji is given the... they're kind of like put through some training while they prepare to move on to this phase 2, keeping their physicals up. It keeps being brought up that every time Rei and Asuka compete, they perfectly tie every single time, and then Shinji comes last because he's physically the worst. And Misato calls him out, and she's like, yo, Shinji, you need to get on their level. Like, yes, this is going to be more about sync rate, so you're still going to get through, but it's still very important that you physically get on their level, so for the love of God, get on these prepubescent girls' level and be like them. And so Shinji actually talks to, I think it's Kaede.
Yeah.
about, like, what's the best way to get on their level. And, like, this is actually a kind of nice moment where Kaede is like, it's called strength and endurance training because that's what you have to do. Train. Every single day. But the other thing is, have you ever heard, like, one of those sappy teen sports movies where a coach says, I want you to give it 110%? That actually, like, makes sense because you're not just giving exactly what you've given before. You're giving 100% of what you've given in the past, and then you're giving more. And each day you gotta do more than you did the day before, and then if you do that, eventually you will grow stronger. And Shinji's like, this is the first time anyone's ever explained physical exercise to me, and it kind of makes sense. So yeah, I'm gonna try and do that.
Kind of don't know if you've been watching me, but I've kind of been swaddled my whole life.
I don't know if you realize this, Kaede, but literally every time I've tried to do exercise, I've only made the effort to do what I have done before. So I'm very consistent and have not improved once. So you explaining the concept of incremental growth to me is very helpful.
Now I can finally pass that math class.
To be fair, Shinji very much does seem to make an effort.
Yeah.
Also, while this is happening with Shinji's conversation with Kaede, Rei and Asuka are stretching together, and then Asuka asks Rei to put her down, but Rei's so focused on the conversation between
This is my chance to eliminate Asuka.
Yeah, so she just fucking throws Asuka on the ground, and Asuka injures herself, and they start yelling at each other. And then this is the part where the harem anime powers get turned up to 11, and I don't fully understand it. Yeah. But Shinji runs at them to get them to stop fighting, and then bumps into Asuka in such a way that his hand goes down the front of her pants. Not like on top, underneath her pants, down the front. I don't understand, but just the powers got turned up to 11, and now Shinji is feeling Asuka's crotch. So Asuka deserves to have the shit kicked out of him. That's just what is what. That's what's what. I will say a lot of the times when Asuka beats up Shinji, I feel like she's just going a bit hard, and it's clearly him tripping and falling, but this time I think she fully deserves to beat him up. I think there's no way that was an accident. That has to have happened on purpose. And Shinji's a pervert.
Shinji's trying to understand his powers and use them. Yeah,
he has tapped into the power and is using it intentionally. God. That's actually horrifying now that I think about it. So Shinji starts training harder. We see the next day at school when they're playing soccer. Kensuke and Toji are both complaining about the fact that it's like 1,000 degrees out. And then they comment on
the future of the past is sure strange.
Yeah.
The far future of 2014.
The far future of 2014. So yeah, they're commenting on the fact that it's like 1,000 degrees out, and it's unfair that they're being expected to run around and play soccer. But at the same time, like, Shinji's fucking going ham on the soccer field, so like, kudos to him, I guess.
Yeah. I do like the little brief Ikari moment in here too.
Yeah, where I think it's Asuka calls out to Hikari.
No, it's just a random student.
Okay, it's a random student. She says, "Oh, Hikari, look, your boyfriend's about to pass out." And Hikari responds like, "Yo, what the fuck are you talking about? Me and Toji aren't even, or me and Suzuhara aren't even like that." And the random student's like, "What are you talking about? I only said your boyfriend. You're the one who brought Suzuhara into the situation."
No, ooh.
It's lunch after that. And we come to the original conclusion that we had before, or not the original conclusion, but Toji and Kensuke call out the fact that Shinji doesn't have a bento, and Shinji's like, yeah, it was Asuka's turn to make a bento, so no bento.
Although she clearly made one for herself.
Yeah, she very clearly made herself a bento, just not for Shinji. And then Rei shows up, and she's like, yo, Shinji, I made a bento, but, like, I accidentally made double the amount of food I would normally eat and put it all inside this one tight little bento.
Could you maybe can't do math.
Could you, like, maybe help me put this bento inside of my body? Or maybe inside of your body, and you'll put something else inside of my body? Like, is that something we could do together? And she's like, yeah, sure, I'll eat your food.
I'll be honest, I think we were reading the wrong book, separate books here, Peter.
That's entirely possible. We're reading the Neon Genesis hentai, right?
Hentai?
Oh, that's right.
Is this with your baka?
Yeah, because it's Baka Shinji.
These bakas and these hinties?
So, Shinji ends up eating her lunch, and meanwhile, Asuka is contemplating like what would have happened if she actually had taken the time to make a bento for Shinji, and she like fantasizes about him just eating 2 bentos. Like that's her fantasy at that point. It's just
I love it. It's just like, what would logically happen here? And he's like, I guess I have to eat both of them. It's like, yeah, that would happen.
Yeah, that's what would happen with Baka Shinji. So anyways, Shinji has a very nice moment with Rei while eating her bento. She comments on the fact that she, like, saw him working out and, like, thinks he's being really cool, trying to go above and beyond to catch up to them. Shinji even says the line of, like, keeping up with you guys is really hard. He's like, what the fuck am I talking about? I haven't even caught up with you guys. I'm not keeping up with you guys. And yeah, Rei's just like, I just think you're being really cool and manly, trying to keep up with everyone. Which makes Asuka sad.
Really cool and manly, trying to, like, beat the shit out of, like, skills of, like, teen girls.
Yeah. Keep in mind this whole time that Asuka and Rei have both been told that one of them is matching up with Shinji, and it's whoever is more compatible with Shinji. And so Asuka, like, starts thinking to herself, like, Shinji and I live together. How the fuck am I losing this compatibility contest? And I'm sitting there reading this thinking, I wonder, Rei's making an effort to be kind and nice and get closer to Shinji, and every time you interact with Shinji at all, it usually involves you beating the shit out of him. I wonder why Rei's getting closer to him when you're not.
Wait,
very weird.
Shinji doesn't like getting his ass kicked?
Oh no, Shinji's absolutely, masochist? How do you say?
She can't pronounce any words, can you?
Oh wait, no, masochist isn't a Japanese word. I can pronounce masochist.
Exactly.
I don't know why for a second I thought masochist was Japanese. Yeah, so I can pronounce masochist. Shinji's a masochist. He's absolutely into getting beaten up.
These kids drinking their Coca-Cola.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, Misato, like, jumps on Rei, and she's like, yo, you want to ride home? And, not Rei, Asuka. And Asuka's just like, Misato, you have literally never once offered me a ride home. In fact, anytime I've asked you for a ride anywhere, you have informed me that the youth of the world need to get a lot better at moving around on their own 2 feet. So what the fuck is this about? And Misato...
Clearly it's just to show off her new car.
Exactly. Misato informs that she got a new interior in her car and she just wants to show it off. And then Asuka's like, wait, follow-up question. Your car's a 2-seater. How the fuck's Shinji getting home? And Misato's like, oh, don't worry about that. Shinji's not going home. Shinji's sleeping with Rei tonight. And Asuka's like, what? And Misato's like, yeah, Shinji's going over to the lab, teaching Rei to cook, and then they're sleeping together. But, like, not, like, a euphemism, like, they're just both sleeping at the lab.
I think it's, what, they're both staying at the lab tonight or something like that.
Yeah. And so, Asuka is sad, because she has lost the one advantage she had over Rei, where she and Shinji live together.
Yeah, it's pretty much that conversation of, like, where Ritsuko is like, man, Rei and Shinji sure are, like, a cool couple together. Hey, that used to be you, right? And Misato just turns it up to, like, 13 or something. And it's like, man, sure, sucks to be Asuka, doesn't it?
Anyways, that's chapter 41, on to 42, which is the conclusion of this Who Has a Better Sync Rate with Shinji competition.
Well, before we move on to the next chapter, the payoff to that chapter is we find it that because Asuka ends up going to the lab to deal with all that stuff. We then end up finding it.
That's the start of the next chapter.
Oh, it is? I thought it was the same chapter.
No, it cuts off as they're getting into the car, and the next chapter is them driving to the lab, and then that's how it starts off.
Yeah, because Asuka's like, take me to the lab, but not for Shinji. I'm going
because I talk to my mom.
Yeah, my mom's there, right?
Yeah, and like even before that line even happens, Misato just like straight up calls up Asuka, and she's like, "Yeah, it's just getting really hard to compete with Rei, isn't it?" And Asuka's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And she's like, "You know that competition to see who ends up being a pilot, they have to have a better sync rate with Shinji." And Asuka's like, "Oh right, yeah, that. It's hard to compete with Rei on that. I'm not competing with Rei over anything else." So anyways, yeah, she asks Misato to drop her at the lab. This is where that Fuyutsuki moment happens, where they're chatting to each other about Fuyutsuki revealing any secret he wants, only to find out that Gendo saddled him with the most busy of busy work.
Child, you may ask me one question about this world, mortal plane we live on, and I shall answer it in truth.
This is your big chance. What secrets do you wish to delve deeper into? There's some shit like that. So yeah, Asuka ends up finding out that, because she, turns to one of the, like, 2 lab techs that had given Fuyutsuki the big, work, and she's like, do you know where my mom is? And they're like, oh, she's still, like, locked up somewhere in the, like, deepest sub-basement of the lab. But she'll, like, probably be out in a couple days or something. No specific timeline for when you'll see your mother next.
Also, I love that, kind of, like, building on the folk of, like, no one gives a fuck about Fuyutsuki in this one. Asuka can't even remember his name.
Yeah, and even the lab techs, one of them walks up and like, hey, Vice Director Fuyutsuki, and then the other one has a thought bubble of, oh, right, that was his name, Fuyutsuki. So yeah, no one fucking cares about Fuyutsuki in this world. Anyways, yeah, so asks about her mom, finds out her mom's not going to be out for a couple days, but, like, it's non-specific of when anyone's going to see Asuka's mom again. And then Asuka's like, secondarily, like, this isn't even why I'm here, but just, like, as a follow-up, would you happen to know where Shinji is? And they're like,
to avoid Shinji. Where would I best stay away from?
And they're like, are you sure that's not the main reason, the entire reason that you're here? Well, anyways, if you're trying to avoid Shinji, if you're trying to avoid Shinji, don't go over there, because that right there is where Shinji's hanging out with Rei. So don't go over there. And then Asuka's like, alright, cool. I'm confused, so I'm going to go to that one spot you said not to go, because Shinji's over there. So she goes over there.
Out loud again.
Yeah, she's like, wink. So anyways, Asuka starts walking over there. While she's walking over, she's like, why does literally everyone keep, like, talking about Shinji as if he's, like, my maiden care in the world? I need people to understand that I hate that boy, but also need to be around him 24/7. And while she's thinking out loud these sentences, Shinji, like, walks up behind her and he's like, hey, what's up, Asuka? And then Asuka is like, oh, I'm here to see my mother, and that's all done now, so I'm going home. Hello, Shinji, and also goodbye. And then Asuka finds out that Shinji's carrying a bunch of gifts that Gendo sent while out on his vacation, which is, I would say classic Gendo, but that sentence is not entirely accurate, so what I will say is, that is classic Shinji Ikari Racing Project Gendo, of him going on a vacation, and while on vacation, mailing souvenirs home to Shinji. So Asuka agrees to help carry some, and then is like, alright, bye Shinji, you have a good night, I guess. And Shinji's like, do you want to just, like, walk home together? And Asuka's like, what? But aren't you staying the night? That's what Misato said. And then we find out that Misato's just a big dum-dum who made this all up, because what actually happened is Yui told Misato that Shinji is welcome to stay the night if they end up, or not even just Shinji, I think she specifically said, like, Shinji and Yui and all the kids, or Shinji, Asuka, and all the kids in general, are welcome to stay the night if they end up doing any lab tests that keep them there very late at night. And also, Rei had brought up the fact that she wants to learn how to cook more from Shinji, and it's just, Misato heard both of those sentences and either got confused or chose to confuse Asuka, and so came up with Shinji spending the night teaching Rei how to cook.
I mean, given Misato's shit-eating grin during the story, I think she took it together and chose to misinterpret it that way.
Yeah. That's probably what it was. So anyways, they start walking home, carrying their gifts, and Rei looks a little bit sad. Anyways, it's time for the final test to decide who's going to be syncing up with Shinji, and the game they're playing is tag, except it's not exactly tag.
I think we missed the cooking thing.
Oh no, the cooking's after we find out what duo is syncing up together.
Because they have... Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they're playing tag to figure out who is syncing up together. And so, it's not quite tag, so what the game is they're going back into that hologram playground, or hologram area, that they went to when Shinji and Rei had to escape the city.
Yep.
Except this time it's a playground, playing tag, Shinji has a headband on, and the other two have to catch him, and take his headband off of his head. Whoever wins is most likely to be paired up with Shinji. If Shinji can manage to keep the headband on his head for 10 minutes, then he wins.
And Shinji gets to pilot with himself. So anyways, it starts off with the two of them individually chasing after Shinji. First, Asuka catches up to him. Being Asuka, she calls out, "Hey Shinji, I found you!" And so Shinji has a better chance to run away. Get back here, little shit!
They trip in such a way that, like, it's, his powers are growing more powerful, and so it's not just, him landing with his face on her chest, but on her chest underneath her shirt somehow. And so she calls him a pervert, and he gets a chance to run away. And then Rei does Rei things and tries to ambush Shinji without calling out that she's found him.
I just like the whole thing of like, haha, the calculation. I knew this would happen. Now I just need to do the math here on swinging. Oh shit, I missed it.
Yeah, shit, I miscalculated. And then there's another pratfall, and they land in an embarrassing fashion, and Shinji grasps her chest, but once again, his powers are growing more powerful. So he's not grasping her chest over her shirt, he's grasping her chest under her shirt. Shinji's harem powers grow more stronger every day.
And then
it's soon enough, the next chapter, it's somehow us, the reader, is going to get roped by Shinji. And so, Shinji uses this as a chance to run away. This is the point I was talking about earlier, where Misato calls out Shinji as very clearly Gendo's son. Because she's like, he's using his powers to his advantage, much like Gendo would. It's just like, Misato, I don't think anything you're saying is appropriate.
There's such a strange mass of people, like, clumped together that neither one of them can reach the headband.
Yeah, Rei and Asuka decide to work together to corner Shinji so he can't keep using harem antics to get away. But Shinji turns the harem power even further, and they fall into, like, a clump of inappropriateness.
That was how to explain it.
Yeah, I'm sticking with what I said.
Yeah.
And so the timer runs down, and none of them has a chance to grab his headband, so Shinji wins. And then as they're leaving, Misato pulls them aside, and she's like, alright, after this test, it's very clear that the two who are getting paired up is Rei and Asuka. You guys were super in sync there. And she's just like, but I won. I'm supposed to be in the team.
Which I do love that it plays it this way, because so often in Neon Genesis, it's always Shinji and a character. And this is actually probably the first time I can think of where Asuka and Rei are like the save the day duo, essentially.
Yeah. So now we get into the final chapter. Well, like, real chapter. There's some extra special bonus chapters at the end. But this chapter is what we kind of talked about earlier, where it's the dancing between Asuka and Rei, and they can't seem to sync up, and they're very antagonistic towards each other, so they just keep fighting the entire time they're supposed to be dancing.
The only time they work together is when it's for Shinji.
Exactly. Which Misato kind of catches on to, because they can't seem to dance well at all, but when Shinji was there, they could dance. So, during his lunch break, after homeroom class, she pulls Shinji into, like, the teacher's room to talk to him. Oh, actually, no, before this is the, Mana and Kaoru situation, where the two girls are both very pissed off at each other because they couldn't sync up, and
but they sync up to tell Kaoru and Mana to go fuck themselves? Mentally, of course.
They're like, Asuka's like, Rei, why don't you tell Shinji why we couldn't manage to sync up? And then, while this is all happening, Mana and Kaoru both show up, and they're like, oh, Shinji, I hear you need a dance partner. I could dance with you. And Kaoru's like, have you ever thought about getting a more masculine and manly dance partner? Why don't you dance with me? And then, immediately, Rei and Asuka both, like, turn back and give them the most fucking Rei violent death stare I've ever seen. And so, the two of them are both like, alright, cool, I'm gonna walk away. And they leave them alone. And so yeah, they get to class. This is when Misato pulls Shinji into the teacher's mind.
You gotta stop it with your shit and de-escalate this.
Yeah, you need to figure out a way to make them friends. Also, I'm telling you this because I have no fucking clue how to make them friends. Also important to note that while having this teacher-student conference in the teacher's lounge, Misato apparently eats all of Shinji's bento. But don't worry, she makes up for it, because she gives him her leftover lunch, which apparently amounts to some bar snacks and a couple jelly donuts, I guess. So, Shinji is given the task of helping them work together during their cooking class. And he has no idea how to do it, so he just tells them to work together to make some miso soup. And Rei's like, alright, Asuka, you chop the vegetables, I'll make the soup base. And they get mad at each other, and Ray's like, your vegetables aren't good enough. So after I'm done making my soup base, I'll just make the vegetables as well. And Asuka's like, oh yeah, well then I'll make my own soup base, and we'll both just make our own soups, and then whoever makes the better soup wins. And that's how we're gonna do this.
And then Mana wins.
Yeah, so we get a little bit of a what's Goldilocks? A Goldilocks and the Three Bears situation, where Shinji tastes Asuka's and she's like, man, she used too much of the miso base and it's very powerful. And then she tries Ray's and she's like, man, she didn't use nearly enough of the miso base. This is too powerful. But I need to answer them and tell them which one's the best. And if I don't do this, we're gonna get real violent. And
well,
like I was kind of
one, it's gonna also turn violent.
I was kind of hoping the solution he would come up with, if one of them used too much seasoning and the other used not enough seasoning, was pouring them both into the same bowl and being like, now this is really good. If you guys work together from the beginning, it'd be really good. Like, that seemed like where it was leading, but no, where it was leading was Mana busting in and being like, I made perfect soup, try it, Shinji. And Shinji's like, wow, this is legitimately perfect soup. You guys are both bad at making soup compared to Mana.
I also would have accepted just him going, both are bad. Try harder next time.
Yeah. So Mana makes the perfect soup, and they're both unhappy about this development. So Misato comes up with a follow-up plan, where we're going, now that Shinji's powers have been growing stronger and stronger, we're going to use this to force the girls to work together, so puts them back into a simulation where the two girls are now trying to escape from Nerv's lab. And that's all they're told. And when they try and call an elevator, they find out that the elevator and also the lab as a whole is haunted, and there's some ghost who keeps falling into them and grabbing them in inappropriate ways.
Yeah, I wonder who the ghost could be.
And
is this
so
a mysterious character we've never seen before? Maybe a computer program?
Yeah, probably. So they end up Scooby-Dooing it, getting a rope. We find out that apparently Ray has perfect memory of this lab, so she can navigate the entire lab and find rope in pitch black, which is kind of cool.
In a computer world.
In a computer world. So they find rope, they trip the ghost, they find out that the ghost is in fact Shinji. They get out of the simulation, and Shinji informs them that, like, he's very sorry about what happened, but just to be clear, he could see and feel nothing while in the simulation, which means that Shinji's powers have grown so strong that him in a void is still, like, groping strangers the entire time without even realizing he's doing it.
I mean, that's not even the important part here, though. The important part is Shinji just fucking disappears 3 times in this situation.
It's very true. But that's probably also tied into his harem powers. All I'm trying to say is Shinji is becoming extremely powerful. Shinji might actually be a ghost. So they catch pervy Shinji. They take them out of the simulation and they're like, wow, you guys actually work together really well. That was awesome. It's great. When Shinji's being a perv, you guys know how to work together. And so they both bully Shinji and then leave. And that's the end of the final chapter. Time for some extra special bonus stages.
Yeah, really not too much per se happens in these ones, because, like, the mountain one doesn't really do much to the overall plot. It's just like, oh, here's another, it's like a leftover scenario that just wasn't used almost, is what it feels like.
Well, I kind of get the feeling that that's what both of these, or all of the extra special bonus stages so far have been, is does nothing for the plot, it's just, it narratively fits roughly around here in the story, and it's just meant to be like a fun little story to fit in the side. Like, honestly, it almost feels like it's a parody of what is already a parody of Neon Genesis.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this one, they go hiking. Asuka decides that we should take the double black diamond path, while Ray's like, we should take the easiest path. So Asuka storms off down the terrible path, and Shinji follows after her, and he's like, I was worried about you. And she's like, why did you actually follow after me? And then it starts raining, and they hide from the rain in a cabin and take off all their clothes to dry and warm up. But there's a sheep between them, but the sheep is held up by, those clothespins, except imagine if clothespins didn't work, because the sheep just keeps falling down between them. And yeah, that's that's the first story. Shinji keeps seeing Asuka in her underwear because the sheet keeps falling down between them. But Shinji also explains that he legitimately was just worried about her, and that's why he went after her, and that makes Asuka feel better.
Also, Rei was completely right in the whole thing. They were there for fun, not to challenge themselves.
Exactly. Now, extra special bonus stage 2. Both Yui and Gendo are away on business trips at this time, so rather than forcing Rei to stay on her own, Yui has set up with Misato for Rei to stay there for the night. And so that's where Rei's going, but Rei's also staying with Misato, but that's where Shinji lives.
I heard he's a ghost.
I heard he's a very pervy ghost. So she goes to stay there. Shinji's doing the cleaning when we cut to that apartment, and Asuka's calling him out. She's like, why are you cleaning? Are you cleaning because Rei's coming over? And Shinji very bluntly is like, no, I'm cleaning because I'm the only one who does the cleaning, and I always do the cleaning. That's why I'm cleaning.
You guys are all filthy!
And so they end up cooking dinner together. And Shinji's like, this is a great chance for you guys to work together. So I'll start working on dinner. You guys put some flour in a bowl, which honestly, Shinji, give better instructions. Put some flour in a bowl is just a terrible step to give anyone to follow.
Unless he didn't need the flour and he just wanted to stop them from causing a hassle.
That's entirely possible. Unfortunately,
fill the shit with some flour. You'll figure it out.
Alright, step 2. Take that bowl full of flour and carefully pour it back into the bag of flour.
Now I'm going to need you to repeat this about 7 times. Trust me, it's for the recipe.
So, of course, this plan does not work out for Shinji, because the moment he gives the two of them a single task, they start fighting over who gets to do the one single task that Shinji gave them. So, they end up fighting over the bag of flour, and it all gets dumped on Rei.
Yeah.
And now here's the fun moment, where you had called out Shinji being a ghost earlier, but Asuka's very clear that there is clearly a ghost in their apartment now, because there's an unnaturally silent and pale being inside their apartment.
And also, an actual ghost.
And also an actual ghost. There are 2 ghosts inside this apartment now.
Yeah. Inside every person there's 2 ghosts.
One of them is gay, the other ghost is also gay. Every person is gay. So Rei takes a shower to clean off the flour. And Shinji's like, oh, I got your bag full of clothes out here. Also, by the way, I'm going to go back to cooking dinner. And then Rei slips and falls in the shower in such a way that she opens the door while falling. And Shinji turns around and is like, are you okay, Rei? And Rei's completely naked when he says that. And he's like, oh, God. And then Asuka's like, what? Is she okay? And then she turns around the corner, and then she's Shinji staring at Rei's naked body. And so she murders him.
Now, this is the interesting one, because if we're talking about Shinji's harem powers at this point, this was not Shinji's fault in any way. Like, not even him being clumsy.
Yeah, no, it was Asuka and Rei creating the situation where Rei had to take a shower, and then Rei in the shower, falling and providing Shinji with a view. So, I'm starting to think that Shinji not only has harem powers, but harem powers so powerful they're manifesting in the form of, like, ESP, where he doesn't even have to physically interact with something for his harem powers to affect it.
And we're not even halfway through the story, right?
I'm scared for where the story is going, if we're not even halfway through and this is already how powerful Shinji's harem powers have gotten.
Like anybody needs to fight the angels.
Yeah. So, Asuka makes a comment about how you may have had your dinner. I don't even think he's eaten at this point. I think she's coming on looking at looking at Rei counted as his dinner. So now it's time for his just desserts, and she, he's not dead at the end, but I'm willing to bet if anyone slapped him, he would die. Like, he's at 1 hit point in a role-playing game right now.
I mean, sometimes you also have to just make the puns work, even if it doesn't. Like, if you get a good one, like, she was probably sitting on that just desserts line for, like, so long, and it's like, shit, why didn't this happen after dinner?
Yeah. Anyways, Shinji's almost dead, and Misato comes home. And then she sees that Shinji has been physically assaulted, and she's like, did someone beat you up? And Shinji's like, nope, it was an accident.
I fell down the stairs.
I fell down the stairs into a doorknob. I promise. Yeah, so that was this volume. What'd you think?
Yeah, it's a fun one. I wouldn't say it's one of the stronger ones. It's definitely, I think, falls close to the weaker, but it has some really good moments. As I mentioned, the part with, the miso soup was actually a pretty funny scene itself, or even Mana and Kaoru trying to talk to them and just getting the dead eye. But I think my favorite thing about this volume is that legitimately Rei and Asuka being the ones that are paired together is a really good twist, I think.
Yeah, so I would say this volume has less moments. Like, the last volume had a lot of really amazing, funny moments, especially with Toji.
Yeah.
I'd say this one has less specific moments that I'd single out from it for being really fun or good. But what I would say is that this one does a good job with advancing the plot in the sense that, like, at the start of this one, they were just getting ready for the next phase, and over the course of this one, we went from Shinji being for sure one of the two main, and then the other two fighting over the second one, and ended up with the other two working together to be the main pilots, and Shinji's the backup one. So, I would say this did a lot where we are very clearly at a different point at the end of the story than we were at the beginning of the story. So,
that's a good way to put it.
Even if this one isn't one I'd be likely to go back and reread, I would still say this definitely added a lot to the story.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it.
Well then.
Yeah, so we'll wrap this episode up. So if you'd like to reach out to us, you can email us at whatismypodcastabout@gmail.com with any questions or anything about the series as we go forward. We also upload these podcast episodes every Wednesday on all podcasting platforms as well as YouTube. Make sure to like, favorite, subscribe, share it with a friend, write a review. Word of mouth definitely helps with spreading the podcast out to new people, and we've had a lot of growth this year, so we'd like to definitely see more, so keep it up. We also have the Instagram page, which we update with facts about the series as we go through, little tidbits of information, describing a few things, explaining some things, as well as polls here and there, where we can interact. We're pretty quick about getting back with questions on that one as well. And as always, Peter, what can we expect on the next episode of the Shinji Ikari Raising Project, Volume 8?
Alright, I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but we're going to get... You know what? I don't think we're getting a culture festival. I'm going back to my White Day prediction. We're getting a White Day. Enough time has passed that it's been a month in this story. Also, doubling back down, we're getting physical... not angels, but maybe. Evangelions. We're getting Evangelions, we're getting White Day. Kaoru's gonna kiss Shinji on the mouth. Fan service. Plenty of it.
The most.